Well, I sure have a challenge for this video. I have a request from a client to produce that little painting onto this large blank canvas. You can see the size difference. Will I manage, and will the client be happy with the results? So for this commissioned artwork, I actually found myself behind schedule, and I had to complete this large painting in literally 3 days. So to speed up the process, I decided to use acrylic paint for the underpainting. Now the benefit of using acrylic paint is that it's water-based and it's fast drying, especially here in our climate where it's hot and dry. Acrylic paint will literally dry on the canvas within a couple of minutes, and so I decided I would use it to cover the whole of the canvas as the underpainting. So I mixed up the first batch, which was basically blue, a darker purple, almost blue, and then gradually I added more red so that it would become a stronger purple color, and then I started putting in the main compositional elements of the painting. You'll notice on the right hand side there on the table I've placed my original small painting that I had done, and it's the painting that the client had seen and which they wanted replicated. And so I kept glancing to the painting for reference, as well as judging the colors to make sure that I'm mixing the correct colors as I go along. The client did say that they wanted the painting pretty much the same as they saw in the small painting. So I didn't have too much artist license with regards to deviating from the original. Although later on you'll notice during this painting I did deviate slightly, but in my opinion that was for the benefit of the painting. But we'll find out from the client eventually if they're happy with it. So you're probably wondering, is it even feasible or possible to use acrylic and oil paints on the same canvas? Well, yes, it is possible, provided that acrylic paint is always used first. You can paint oil paints on top of acrylic, but never vice versa. Well, basically now I'm done with the acrylic paint. It's dry, and I want to mix up the oil paints. And you'll notice on my palette I'm still using those 3 main colors: blue, red and yellow, as well as white. So I mix up this purple lavender kind of color, which I want, and then next to it I mix up an orange mixture using red, yellow and white. And these 2 colors, this lavender purple and this orange kind of color, they really work well together, especially when placed next to each other. They're actually complementary colors. They're on the opposite side of the color wheel, and somehow these 2 colors really almost vibrate next to each other in the artwork. So now that the acrylic paint is well and truly dried, I can now start painting the oil paints on top of this layer. So it's very important that every square inch is covered or eventually covered with oil paint. And the reason being is that I find acrylic paint has more of a matte finish, whereas the oil paints have more of a glossy finish. And if you look at the painting sideways and you've missed some areas, or you failed to cover some areas, the acrylic matte surface will show up against the glossy oil painted surfaces. So this is something you want to avoid, and you want everything to have a glossy finish with the oil paint. And so you really need to make sure that you do cover the entire canvas with the oil paints. So now I start placing in the highlights on the clouds in order to achieve the highlights, I just mix in a little bit of extra white with the orange color that I'd already previously mixed, and then I start applying those highlights on the clouds. Often artists will put the highlights on towards the end of the painting, and you can if you so wish, or you can put them on in the middle of the painting if you wish. There's no really right or wrong way to paint. If you want to stand on your head and paint, you can. And you'll notice that throughout this painting I'm adding and taking away things, and a lot of these highlights I paint over at a later stage, because at this point these highlights are a little bit too bright or too light. But I'm still at the stage where I'm getting in the main elements of the painting, and so I'm not overly concerned whether things are placed in the correct place. So you'll notice here that I'm applying the paint on the canvas very loosely, without much care at all, almost slapping the paint on haphazardly, as it were. The reason I'm doing this is I'm trying to maintain this impressionistic type of brushwork. I'm trying to avoid overworking or over blending the paint on the canvas, and rather I'm trying to employ the broken color technique, which is a technique that the Impressionist painters used, and basically means that the paint is applied directly onto the canvas and left like that. So there's no blending or smoothing going on, or very little of it happening. So up close you're going to see a lot of brush strokes, individual colors next to each other. But from a distance, if you stand back, this creates quite a pleasing visual experience. Most Impressionist painters avoided using black, and so in this painting I also made an effort not to use any black. And the darkest colors within this painting is probably just a dark navy blue purple, where I mixed red and ultramarine blue in order to obtain darker colors within the painting. At this point I switched back to using one of the larger brushes. I'd actually bought a couple of these larger brushes from our local hardware here. They were just very cheap, like $3 brushes. But the benefits of switching to a larger brush is I found that using smaller brushes you kind of get sucked into the details, and you kind of lose that spontaneity. You lose that impressionistic kind of feeling that you're trying to achieve. Whereas with larger brushes, I found it much easier to be more spontaneous, apply larger dabs of colors, and it also helps one to avoid getting overly concerned or sucked into the finer details of the painting. And so I found here at this point the impressionistic feel was starting to come back, once I had switched to the larger brush. And this actually was quite enjoyable, it was quite liberating, because you're not tied down to trying to recreate a photorealistic piece of artwork, but you're rather trying to create something which is an impression of what you see. So it's quite fun and enjoyable painting something like this, compared to trying to create something that's hyper realistic, as it were. What helped to keep this painting pretty loose was the fact that I wasn't working from a photo in this case, but rather I was working from my smaller painting that I'd created as a source of reference. Later on, of course, I did use a photo, but it wasn't trying to achieve like a copy of that photo. Rather, it was just a source of color that I was trying to bring into the painting. So now I'm painting in the water. In order to keep this kind of loose, you can see I'm just making very loose brush strokes, horizontal brush strokes, a little bit wavy, kind of just twist the brush a little bit to give the brush stroke a little bit of an angle, but to keep it as impressionistic as possible, and placing those two color combinations next to each other, the orange and the purples, with the occasional blue stroke. Most of the blue is just showing through from the underpainting, but later I would come back and place oil paint over those blue areas. Again, I'm just crisscrossing, making large random strokes, large strokes towards the foreground and smaller strokes towards the sun. What I realized with Impressionism is it's really a lot about the brush strokes. The more you can keep the brush strokes visible, the better. And so I really avoided blending the brush strokes in. Basically make your stroke and leave it and move on. If something is not quite right, you can always come back with another brush stroke of a different color and place that stroke over to cancel maybe a stroke that previously was off center or didn't work well. So yeah, reintroduce a smaller brush, and the reason I'm doing this is just to kind of create some perspective in the painting. And the perspective is seen as the receding ripples and waves recede into the distance. That really creates that perspective feeling. And so obviously in order to create those smaller waves you need to use a smaller brush. But the same technique, just making random brush strokes horizontally, not avoiding any blending but just placing the paint on the canvas. A lot of the Impressionism artworks really vibrate with light and color, and this is what I wanted to try to achieve in this painting, was an artwork that really vibrated with light and color. And this landscape in the form of the sunset is a great canvas to do that, or to demonstrate it on. You can do it in the clouds, in the sky. The water specifically was a great place to highlight these effects. Another thing I really tried to achieve in this painting is the placement or the use of warm and cool colors next to each other. And this was a great subject to do that with, because you've got two different colors, the blue and the orange, that compete against each other, as it were, but they do so in such a complementary way that it draws the viewer into the painting, and it creates a very soothing piece of artwork for the viewer to enjoy. So in order to create more vibrancy within the painting, I did place a lot of dabs of bright colors in the water, as well as in the clouds. and this helped with the vibrancy. These were basically just the highlights of the orange and the white reflections in the water. So behind the clouds, on the upper side of the painting, or the upper areas of the painting, we have this intense blue. In order to get that blue, I mixed ultramarine blue together with cobalt and just a dab of white, and then I blended that blue in towards the middle, progressively becoming orange around the sun. This was the only section of the painting that more blending was happening in it. Now, technically speaking, impressionistic artwork would kind of avoid that blending from happening. But my original piece of artwork, the little painting, this part of the painting was blended, and so I just kept it that way. So at this point in the painting, I was pretty much happy with it, from the perspective that it was a pretty close representation of the little painting that I had done, and which the client really liked. However, I wasn't really happy with the clouds, the purple section of the clouds. To me, it was just really flat, and this was the point where I introduced a new color, which was blue, light blue, and maroon. You can see I'm not sure if this was the right decision. I kept standing back, looking at it, and I remember at the time I was really worried that I'd made the wrong decision, that I would have to wipe this paint off and just keep the purple as it was. But I had this photo that I'd seen which had these two color combinations, this light blue and this maroon, that I really liked, and which I thought would go very well with this little painting that I had. The combination would go well, specifically with the orange highlights within the painting. And so at this point I kept looking at the painting from a distance, and then coming to the conclusion that I should just commit. And I think I'm happy that I did that, because as I committed to this process, and as I layered the colors bit by bit onto the canvas, my confidence came back, and I felt that this was the right decision, especially when I added the maroon color. The maroon color basically I applied to the more shadowed areas, the base or the bottom areas of the clouds, and this gave the clouds a little bit more structure and volume, which I was looking for. And I found that the maroon color together with this light blue worked really well with the orange. They went hand in hand, as it were. So in order to get this light blue, I mixed once again ultramarine blue together with cobalt, but a little bit more red, and some white, and this gave me this color. And then the maroon was basically just red with a little bit of blue, so it was a darker plum color that I used. But it was at this point, it was a battle of wills. In my mind, I was thinking of the client and what the client wanted. But at the same time, I knew that little painting that I'd done had flaws and could be improved on. And I felt that this color combination that I was introducing at this point would really improve the overall aesthetics of the painting. So I just went for it, and I really hope that the client likes it just as much as I did. as a close-up of my palette, you can see the different colors that I've mixed. You can see more of the maroon red that I'm now introducing to the painting, as well as this blue mixture that I've made with cobalt blue, ultramarine and white that I've mixed up, as well as orange. So these are the three main colors I'm focusing on now, and overlaying them throughout the painting wherever it's applicable. You can see the color combination is working well now. That light blue color mixed in with subtle pinks and oranges are just gelling well together at this point. So I was quite happy, and I just focused on introducing those maroon elements, pink maroon elements, together with that blue in areas, as well as placing the orange highlights on the clouds, which is basically the highlights from the sun. Now the clouds directly superimposed over the sun or close to the sun are basically faded out into pure orange. It's like the power of the sun has melted away all of the purples and darker hues within it, so that you're just left with the orange. Well, since I'd introduced new colors within the painting, orange became one of the more predominant colors. And I realized that I had too much yellow, and so here you see me introducing more and more orange brush strokes, basically overlapping them over any yellow areas that I had within the painting. I found actually holding the palette in my hand, even though this is the heavy glass palette, was much better and easier to finish these final details on the painting. Holding the palette close to the painting just makes it so much easier to apply the paint. There's less of a distance, if you're walking back and forth from your palette, it takes much longer. Then around the reflection of the sun, I realized that it was lacking in orange. As you see around the sun in the painting, it's predominantly this light orange color, and I realized that the reflection in the water did not reflect that which was in the upper section of the painting. So I started introducing more orange horizontal brush strokes representing the ripples of the water in this section. Then for the white areas of the sun reflected, I basically mixed up some white and a little bit of orange, so it was an off-white color, not quite as intense as the sun itself. And these are also basically applied horizontally with a couple of dabs where I wanted to add a little bit of like water sparkle effect in the painting. Well, I hope you enjoyed watching this video as much as I enjoyed painting this sunset, and ultimately I also hope the client likes this painting. I'll definitely give you an update in a future video, and yeah, if you enjoyed this video, please give me a like and subscribe. This helps me to keep motivated to maybe keep on making more videos like this. Thanks, bye.